The sun barely pierced through the clouds as Elena Ruiz turned onto Willow Creek Drive, her mail satchel slung over her shoulder, boots crunching across the sidewalk she'd walked for 6 years. Every house, clean lawns, polished doors, but something was off. The mailboxes were gone. She stopped dead in front of the Morrison house. No mailbox, just a metal plate where it used to be. Her eyes darted left, then right. No boxes. Not one. A cluster of signs stood where community garden used to be. Bright red letters. Mail service relocated by order of HOA. Elena's gut twisted. This wasn't legal. She reached for her phone. Footsteps clicked behind her. She turned and saw Marge Wilcox, the president, dressed like she was going to a country club. Behind her, 2 other board members flanked her like bodyguards. Marge's voice was syrupy. "You can turn around now. This street doesn't need your kind of service anymore." Elena stiffened. "I'm with United States Postal Service. This route is under federal jurisdiction." Marge smiled cold. "Not anymore. You'll find the new centralized mail unit at the far end of the subdivision. Consider it an upgrade. You should be thanking us." Elena's fists clenched. "You can't just remove federally assigned mailboxes. That's obstruction." Marge leaned in. "And you can't trespass. This street is now designated private under HOA jurisdiction. Didn't you read the notice we mailed last month? You removed the mailboxes. How was I supposed to get the notice?" Marge gave a slow, mocking clap. "That's not our problem." A small group of residents began to gather. Silent, watching. No one spoke up. Elena took a breath and stepped away. Her route wasn't finished, and this wasn't over. She walked to her truck, eyes burning. Her job wasn't just a paycheck, it was stability for her and her son. As she turned onto her own street, her heart dropped. Her mailbox gone. In its place, a stake with a red paper flapping in the wind. She yanked it off. HOA privilege revoked. "You've been warned." She stood frozen, the weight of it hitting all at once. Her uniform, her truck, even her address, none of it protected her here. Not from them. That night, Tommy sat quietly at the kitchen table, watching her tape the notice to the fridge like a threat she needed to remember. He looked up. Are they allowed to do that? Elena didn't answer. She stared at the paper like it would answer for her. The next morning, she reported the obstruction to her supervisor. He barely looked up. They forwarded her call. Then she heard a voice she didn't recognize. Calm, precise. "This is Postmaster Langston. We'll take it from here." Click. 3 hours later, a black SUV pulled into Willow Creek. No one knew who the man in the suit was, but he wasn't here for pleasantries. He walked with purpose toward the HOA office, and the silence that followed was loud enough to shake the whole block. Elena didn't sleep that night. Every creak outside made her eyes shoot open. She kept the porch light on, even though it only lit the empty space where her mailbox once stood. She didn't know what scared her more, that the HOA thought they could get away with this, or that no one was stopping them. At dawn, she poured black coffee into a chipped mug and sat at the kitchen table. Tommy came down quietly, dragging his backpack. "You're not walking alone today," she said. Tommy blinked. "Why?" "Because this neighborhood's changing, and not for the better." On their walk, they passed houses with drawn curtains. No one waved. No one smiled. At the end of the block, Elena stopped cold. The HOA had installed a chain-link fence around the old community mailbox zone. A sign read, "Authorized access only." Her fists clenched. Tommy tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, they blocked your job." "No," she said. "They tried. There's a difference." She dropped Tommy off and returned to her route. As she pulled up to Willow Creek Drive again, she paused. No cluster boxes. No access. Just a woman in a lawn chair watching. "Marge." She waved lazily, then raised her phone like she was filming. Elena turned away. She rerouted, trying to finish the rest of her deliveries, but something was off. At 2 different homes, people had come out and quietly asked if they'd been blacklisted. One elderly man showed her a note on his door, "HOA mail privileges suspended." Elena's stomach dropped. This wasn't just about her. This was coordinated. She returned to the station and filed a report again. The clerk gave her a look, like she was overreacting. Then she saw the black SUV again, parked, waiting. She stepped closer. The driver's window lowered. Postmaster Langston looked up from a folder. They didn't just remove boxes. They rerouted service without authorization, disrupted federal operations, and targeted you personally. That's a felony in 3 different ways. She stared at him, not sure whether to feel relief or dread. What happens now? Langston closed the file. You keep doing your job. We'll handle the rest. But the next day, Elena's job wasn't waiting for her. Instead, there was a folded letter taped to her locker. Her name written in heavy red ink. She opened it slowly. You are hereby reassigned pending investigation into inappropriate conduct on Willow Creek Drive. Effective immediately. Her hands trembled. She stormed into the supervisor's office. He didn't meet her eyes. The HOA called in a complaint. Said you were hostile. Trespassing. One of the board members filed a restraining order. It's a lie. We're not taking sides, Elena. Until this is resolved, you're off the route. She stood there, silent, shaking. They'd won. By the time she picked Tommy up from school, the mailbox at their house had been replaced. Not by her, but by the HOA. A locked community box with a slot too small to fit anything but junk mail. Inside, a single envelope. It wasn't stamped. It just read, "Final notice." That night, Elena didn't speak. She sat in the dark while Tommy watched cartoons with the volume low. Then a knock at the door. She opened it slowly. Mrs. Lindholm stood there, old, fragile, but with fire in her eyes. They shut off my medication delivery, she whispered. I haven't had my heart pills in 3 days. Elena led her inside without saying a word. She made tea. She called the pharmacy herself. Then she asked one question. Who else is being cut off? Mrs. Lindholm looked down at her hands. More than you know. Outside, a car engine rumbled. Elena looked through the window. A man was watching the house from a black sedan. Not the postmaster. Someone else. When she stepped outside, the car peeled off, and in its place was a single brick, resting where her mailbox used to be, wrapped in twine. A photo of her and Tommy taped to it. On the back, one word scratched in ink. Enough. Elena held the photo with shaking fingers. The image was old, printed in low quality, her and Tommy at the county fair 2 years ago, standing by the Ferris wheel. Whoever left it had dug through her life, through her past. She checked the windows, locked the doors, and kept the lights off. That night, she didn't sleep. She just watched the street, eyes fixed on shadows that didn't move. In the morning, she found Mrs. Lindholm sitting on her porch in a cardigan, cup of cold tea in hand. She looked tired, but she nodded as Elena approached. They did this before, she said quietly. Not the mailboxes, but something like it. Years ago, a family built a small ramp for their disabled daughter. The HOA tore it down while they were out. Called it a visual obstruction. Elena listened, rage brewing beneath her ribs. Why didn't anyone stop them? Mrs. Lindholm looked away. Because no one wants to be the first one to speak. They're afraid they'll be next. The next day, Elena walked into the USPS branch not in uniform, but carrying folders. She wasn't here to deliver mail. She was here to build a case. Langston's team had been gathering reports. But now Elena had something more: witnesses. 3 residents met her in the back lot, away from prying eyes. They spoke in low voices. They'd had packages go missing. One woman's voting ballot had been intercepted and returned with "resident moves" stamped on it. Another said her HOA dues had suddenly doubled after she refused to vote for Marge's re-election. It wasn't just about mail. It was control. Langston listened, writing notes in shorthand. Then he closed the file, stood, and said one sentence. This is bigger than we thought. Back on Willow Creek, things were changing fast. HOA notices plastered windows. Fines were flying like confetti. Residents whispered but still didn't speak up publicly. Fear ruled the street. Elena wasn't allowed to deliver anymore, but she walked the neighborhood anyway. She checked on Mrs. Lindholm. She brought groceries to the Delgados, whose internet had been shut off by an accidental HOA maintenance order. One evening, she came home to find Tommy missing. His backpack sat by the door. His shoes were inside. Panic hit like a wave. She ran outside, calling his name. No answer. She circled the block, checked every bush, every yard. Nothing. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A photo appeared. Tommy, sitting in the HOA's office, staring at the security camera. Her heart stopped. She ran. She didn't care about restraining orders. She didn't care about rules. She burst into the HOA building, slammed open the door. Tommy looked up from the corner, startled. Marge stood beside him, arms crossed. We found him walking around unattended, she said coldly. We were simply keeping him safe. Elena pulled him close, fists clenched. If you touch him again, I'll burn this entire office down with the truth. Marge leaned in, voice like venom. You're already finished. The community will forget you. They always do. But behind her, something shifted. Daryl, the HOA vice president, stepped into view. He looked pale, uneasy. His voice cracked. We shouldn't have involved the kid. Marge turned on him, eyes sharp. He took a step back. Elena locked eyes with him. You know what's happening is wrong. Daryl looked down. Then he reached into a drawer, pulled out a flash drive, and slipped it into Elena's hand when no one was looking. Later that night, she plugged it into her laptop. Footage, dozens of clips. HOA meetings, private surveillance, residents being discussed like game pieces. And one clip that made her blood run cold. Marge on the phone. She was laughing. If the mailwoman won't back off, we'll make sure she disappears. Elena sat back, hard hammering. This wasn't just control. It was a threat. A federal crime caught on record. She stared at the screen, then looked at Tommy asleep on the couch. The HOA didn't just pick the wrong mail carrier. They picked a mother with nothing left to lose. Elena stood in the dark, the only light coming from the glow of her laptop screen. Her breath was shallow. The footage on the flash drive was damning. Organized manipulation, illegal surveillance, and outright threats. This wasn't HOA policy enforcement. This was organized harassment. She copied the files. Twice. Then a third time onto an encrypted drive she wore around her neck. At dawn, she called Langston. He met her at the post office, eyes tired but focused. You understand what you have here? He asked. Yes, Elena said. Enough to shut them down for good. Langston slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside was a reinstatement letter, stamped with federal authority. You're going back on your route today. But they filed a restraining order, Elena said. Langston leaned forward. That order is void. We filed a federal injunction. You're protected now, officially. And we're watching every move they make. She walked out of the post office wearing her uniform again, satchel slung over her shoulder like armor. The first step back onto Willow Creek Drive felt different. She wasn't alone anymore. She wasn't afraid. But the street was still cold. Residents peeked through blinds but said nothing. The mailbox slots were still chained. Until Daryl stepped outside. He met her halfway down the sidewalk. They know, he said quietly. About the flash drive. She didn't flinch. Let them know. I'm not hiding. Daryl handed her a slip of paper. A list. Names, addresses. Residents who had spoken up before and been punished. Elena scanned the page. There were more than 20 names. They're scared, he said. But if you talk to them, if they know you're not backing down, maybe they'll stand up. Elena started that afternoon. House by house. Door by door. She didn't come with threats. She came with truth. By sundown, she had 6 people willing to file statements. The next morning, 9 more. And that night, someone broke into her garage. Tommy woke her up, whispering, There's someone outside. She grabbed a flashlight and ran barefoot through the backyard. The side door to the garage swung open. Inside, boxes were torn apart, papers scattered. But the drives were safe. Whoever it was left behind a calling card, a yellow envelope nailed to the garage wall. Inside, a single sentence. You think you're building something, but you're one match away from losing it all. She took it straight to Langston. He didn't speak, just added it to the file. By day 5, Marge called an emergency HOA meeting. No public notice. No agenda. Closed doors. But Elena showed up anyway. Residents followed her. One by one, a crowd began to form. Marge opened the door, startled by the gathering. Her eyes scanned the faces. "You're not allowed here," she said. "This is a public matter now," Elena replied. "And you've made it personal." She held up a speaker and played the recording. Marge's voice filled the air, that chilling laugh followed by the threat. The silence was immediate. Yes. Whispers. Then outrage. A man in the crowd shouted, "That's how you talked about us." Another woman, clutching her toddler, stepped forward. "You canceled my child's therapy delivery. You said it was an error." Residents flooded the HOA hall, surrounding Marge. Daryl stepped beside Elena, eyes steady. "The board just voted. She's out. Effective immediately." Marge tried to speak, but no one listened. The crowd moved her aside. Some recorded. Others simply turned their backs. But it wasn't over. That night, Elena found her tires slashed. Her front door, marked with red spray paint. And in the mailbox, now mysteriously reinstalled, an unmarked USB drive. She played it on an isolated laptop, breath caught in her chest. It was footage of her and Tommy. Grocery store. Playground. Front yard. Dated weeks before the first incident. They'd been watching her long before the mailboxes ever disappeared. Elena stared at the screen, hands trembling. This wasn't HOA revenge. This was something else entirely. Elena paced the living room, the footage still playing on repeat in her mind. Every clip was personal. Intimate. Someone had been following her and Tommy, tracking their routines, studying their lives. This went far beyond property disputes or mail routes. She called Langston. "They planted surveillance before any incident was reported," she said, voice sharp with fear. Langston responded calmly, but his tone carried weight. "We suspected this wasn't isolated. We've been building a broader case. But this confirms it. We're dealing with an organized network, not just a corrupt HOA." Elena sat down hard on the couch, Tommy sleeping in the next room. "Then who are they?" Langston was silent for a moment. "We believe elements of the HOA were collaborating with a private contractor. One known for operating in gray zones, data scraping, intimidation, property flipping. This wasn't about mail. It was about pressure. Forcing residents out, rezoning properties, flipping them at profit. And I was just in their way," Elena said flatly. "You became a symbol," Langston said. "One they couldn't control." Later that day, she returned to Willow Creek to finish her route. The difference now was staggering. Residents came out of their homes. Children waved. Neighbors handed her letters by hand, smiling, whispering thank you. But the surveillance never stopped. At house number 14, she spotted a man parked in a gray van, staring through mirrored sunglasses. He didn't move, didn't blink. She approached. He rolled up the window and drove off. She got the license plate. Langston ran it. Registered to a shell company with ties to 3 other neighborhoods, places where HOAs had collapsed under pressure, where residents had been driven out by sudden violations and fines. It was a pattern. Langston's team activated full-scale investigation protocols. They subpoenaed the HOA's financials, Marge's phone records, and surveillance contracts. That night, Elena got a call from Daryl. His voice was low. "I think they're planning something. Purge of the board. I saw an email. They're erasing documents, hard drives. Digital cleaning." Elena didn't hesitate. She called Langston again. "You need to move now, before everything vanishes." The next morning, unmarked vehicles pulled into Willow Creek. Federal agents, postal inspectors, cybercrime investigators. They descended on the HOA headquarters with warrants in hand. Marge was arrested in her driveway, still wearing her bathrobe. Cameras caught the moment. Neighbors stood on lawns, watching silently. Some clapped. Some cried. Inside the HOA building, agents pulled servers, documents, everything. The story made headlines by noon. HOA execs caught in federal crackdown. Elena watched the news from her porch. Tommy curled next to her. She didn't feel triumph, just quiet relief and exhaustion. But it wasn't over. Later that evening, her doorbell rang. A tall man in a brown coat handed her an envelope. Inside, a sealed letter marked federal testimony request. Langston had warned her this might come. They needed her statement for a congressional oversight review. The case had reached the top. She'd become the center of a national conversation. Her image, uniformed stern, holding a mail satchel, appeared across media platforms. Not for fame, for justice. But something still bothered her. The surveillance started too early, before she ever challenged the HOA, before the mailbox went missing. She went back to the USB and reviewed every frame. Then she saw it. A man in the background. Not Marge. Not Daryl. Someone else. Appeared more than once. Always just far enough not to notice. She paused the footage. He wasn't HOA. He was something else. She called Langston again. We missed someone. He sighed. We suspected a third party. A silent investor behind the HOA board. Someone with deeper ties. Do you know who? Langston hesitated. Not yet, but we're close. That night, Elena stood on her porch, staring at the mailbox now fully restored. Fresh paint, reinforced steel. It looked ordinary, but it represented everything they tried to break. And failed. She picked up a letter addressed to her. Handwritten. Inside were 3 words. You survived this. The next morning, she was back on her route. The sun was out. Neighbors waved. Some handed her thank you cards. Others just nodded. And as she walked past Willow Creek Drive for the 100th time, she didn't see fear anymore. She saw a community waking up. And in the distance, far behind a hedge, a gray figure moved. Still watching. Still waiting. But Elena didn't flinch. She carried on, like she always did. The days after the arrests were quiet. Too quiet. It wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the stillness before another storm. Elena could feel it in her bones. Every time she stepped outside, she felt watched. Not by neighbors. By someone trained not to be seen. She started double-checking her locks. Setting alarms. Not out of paranoia, out of instinct. Then the call came. Langston again, his voice clipped and urgent. We found something in the HOA financial records. A series of transfers, offshore accounts, dummy corporations. And one name keeps appearing. Gregory Vance. The name meant nothing to Elena. He was a former municipal developer, Langston explained, blacklisted 5 years ago for shady land acquisitions. He disappeared after a federal land fraud case in Arizona. Turns out he didn't disappear. He rebranded. Started buying into HOAs under aliases, quietly influencing boards from the shadows. So, he was behind all of this. He funded it, Langston said. The fines, the surveillance, the intimidation tactics, it was all a machine, and the HOAs were his gears. Why target me? Elena asked. Langston paused. Because you disrupted the system. Most people cave. You didn't. That made you dangerous to him. That night, Elena's phone lit up again. A message. Meet me where the mail route ends. No cops. No cameras. She stared at it. No name. No number. Just those words. Against every instinct she went. She parked at the edge of the cul-de-sac where her route ended. The street was dark, lined with heavy trees. Her flashlight barely cut through the silence. Then she saw him. Tall, older, wearing a dark coat. No expression. Gregory Vance. You've caused me a lot of trouble, he said, voice low, emotionless. All you had to do was walk away. Elena stood her ground. All you had to do was leave people alone. He stepped closer. You think you've won something. But I have 50 more HOAs just like this. This was just a test run. Then why meet me? She asked. Because I wanted to see it for myself, he said. The woman who broke the pattern. I wanted to know what made you different. Elena didn't blink. I deliver mail. Rain, snow, fire, or fraud. That's what makes me different. A strange smile twitched on his face. Then he turned and walked away. She didn't follow. Didn't need to. Langston was already watching from a distance. Agents followed Vance back to a rental property. They had him under surveillance now, waiting for the right moment. But Elena's mind wasn't on victory. It was on Tommy. She rushed home, heart hammering. Tommy was safe, asleep, but a single envelope sat on his nightstand. Inside was a photo. Elena holding Tommy's hand, walking past the mailbox. Taken that morning. This was a warning. Langston increased protection. Patrols now passed her street every hour. A federal case was built around Vance. But Elena still felt the pressure like a weight around her ribs. The community rallied. More neighbors came forward. Signed affidavits. Video recordings surfaced. A retired HOA treasurer turned over old documents showing Vance's offshore directives. And then it happened. Gregory Vance tried to flee. His private jet was intercepted in Nevada, minutes from takeoff. Elena watched the footage. Vance in handcuffs, head down, surrounded by agents. The silence that followed was real peace. In court, Marge testified in exchange for leniency. Her statements confirmed everything. Vance's control, the manipulations, the systematic pressure placed on residents to sell, move, or fall in line. Elena was asked to testify too. She stood before the courtroom, wearing her uniform. When asked why she never walked away, she simply said, "Because every letter I deliver is a promise that someone still cares. And I refuse to let that be erased." When it was over, she stepped outside, the sun warm on her face. The crowd outside clapped, but it wasn't for her alone. It was for what she represented. Not resistance, resilience. The next morning, a boy left a letter in the mailbox. To the mail lady who fought back. Inside, a drawing. Elena standing tall, a cape around her shoulders, holding a stack of letters like shields. For the first time in weeks, she smiled. Not because it was over, but because she knew this. What she did mattered more than anyone realized. The sun crested over Willow Creek as Elena stepped onto her porch, uniform crisp, satchel slung tight across her shoulder. The air smelled different, cleaner, like it had shed the weight of everything that had poisoned it. The neighborhood was alive again. Doors open, children biking past, old men waving from lawn chairs. But something inside her wasn't settled. The mailbox at house number 17 still creaked the wrong way when opened. A small thing. But after everything, Elena noticed the small things. Langston called that afternoon. Vance pled guilty, he said. Multiple federal charges. Wire fraud, intimidation, conspiracy. He's not getting out anytime soon. Elena closed her eyes. It wasn't relief. Not yet. Langston continued. We're expanding the investigation. Over a dozen neighborhoods across the country have opened formal inquiries. You started something bigger than you realize. Elena sat on her porch swaying, letting the wind rock her. She thought about the other communities, families who might be fighting quiet battles, afraid to speak, wondering if anyone would believe them. She wouldn't let this end with her. That night, she spoke at a town hall. Not just about her experience, but about standing up, connecting, refusing to be pushed into silence. People cried. Some cheered. All listened. The video went viral. By morning, she'd received over 100 emails. Residents from across the country. Same stories. Same pressure. Same fear. And now hope. A week later, a woman named Sophia showed up at the post office. Mid-40s, military veteran, eyes sharp but tired. "I'm from Briarwood Estates," she said. "We're next. And we need help." Elena didn't hesitate. She reached into her locker, pulled out a folder labeled active cases. Hers was the first. Now there were 3 more. She handed Sophia a list of steps. Legal contacts. Federal emails. A roadmap. "You don't have to be loud," she said. "You just have to not disappear." Outside, the sky turned golden. She watched Sophia leave, head high. Tommy ran across the lot with a backpack and a grin. Did they shut down the bad guys? Elena knelt beside him. Some of them. But we're not done yet. The mailbox outside the post office had a fresh coat of paint, gleaming like a badge. Someone had stenciled words beneath the slot. Truth delivered here. People took photos. Tourists stopped by just to see the infamous box. But Elena didn't care about the attention. She cared that it still stood. That no one had dared touch it again. Weeks passed. Then months. Elena kept walking her route. Through sun and storm. Through quiet nods and long conversations. Through neighborhoods that had once whispered and now spoke openly. Marge was never seen again. Word had it she moved to a small town in Oregon. Her name vanished from community records, but Vance's legacy remained like scars, and Elena used every one of them as a lesson. One night, as she sorted mail in the back room, she noticed a familiar envelope. No address, no stamp, just her name. Inside, a simple piece of paper. "You're the reason I didn't quit." No signature, just those words. She stared at it for a long time. That was the moment she finally allowed herself to breathe. Not because the battle was over, but because it was worth it. The next morning, she started a new initiative, Maelstrom, a program for postal workers and community members to report irregular HOA actions safely, anonymously, and in real time. It spread fast. Within 2 months, 50 branches nationwide joined. The media returned, not for the scandal, for the movement. A news anchor asked her on camera, "What kept you going?" Elena didn't flinch. Because someone has to walk the path, no matter how broken, and remind the world that silence is not safety. In the final shot of the broadcast, she walked her route again, but this time with others. Neighbors beside her, children waving flags, veterans nodding in respect, letters in hand, truth in every step. The camera panned up, catching the neighborhood from above. No fences, no chains, no fear, just a single woman walking forward. Mailbags slung like armor, head high. And beneath the video, the last caption faded in. "Never underestimate the power of one voice, carried house to house." If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe, because the next battle might be at your doorstep. And someone out there needs to hear this. And we'll be here, delivering every word.